Smith.
I'd like to ask you to close your eyes. Imagine yourself engaged in something that involves taking a risk, stepping out of your comfort zone. What are you doing? What are you imagining? Now open your eyes. Perhaps you're standing in front of a room full of people giving a talk with a fear of public speaking. Or maybe you're imagining yourself trying a risky sport like skydiving, for example. And what are the emotions that you're feeling when you're trying something that's very risky? Your heart's pounding, you're sweating, you're unsure of the outcome. And what could possibly come from taking a risky venture? Maybe you learn something, maybe you're successful, or you absolutely could fail miserably. So what if I could suggest to you over the next few minutes, risk can be reimagined. And in reimagining risk, we can reimagine one of the riskiest professions today, entrepreneurship. And if you can reimagine risk and you can reimagine entrepreneurship, we have the potential to engage more than 10 times the number of innovators to join, to share, and to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. So where do we start? So where are these unknown innovators, and where do we find them, and how do we engage them? I would suggest to you they're women. And let me give you a few facts to back that up. Since 1978, women have been attaining higher educational degrees than men, starting as more associate's degrees in 78, more bachelor's degrees in 82, more master's degrees in 87, and finally in 2006 with more PhDs. And fully in 2013, there were 40% more women attaining higher advanced degrees than men. But let's overlay that with entrepreneurship. In that very same year, 2013, of the 6,500 most highly funded companies in venture capital, most scalable opportunities, there were only 2.7% that were led by women, 97% by men. So where is the disparity between this high educational attainment and this opportunity to look into some of the high growth, high potential fields like entrepreneurship? And why am I talking about this, and why should we care? So there's 3 reasons I'll share with you. The first is a personal one. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I want for her all the opportunities in the world as she chooses careers, including entrepreneurship. The second, as we described, I'm the deputy director of the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. Every day I wake up, this is what I do. And the third, as a society, if we're missing out on 50% of the population and engaging, taking their creativity, we have the opportunity to reverse that trend and create something going forward. So why are women missing? So let me share a backstory with you. 5 years ago, I was invited at a top university to judge a business plan competition. And the idea behind that business was, we're going to create a market, we're going to create a product, we're going to completely develop something from scratch. There were 20 people in the class, 17 women, 3 men, broken into 5 groups. When those businesses and those opportunities were presented, there was 1 female that took the leadership role as the CEO, 3 that were the men in the class, and the fifth was a group of PhD students, incredibly bright, well-spoken. They actually created the name of a man to hold that role. Created it, imagined it. And that, for me, really hit home. Why could this group of women not actually even imagine themselves in their wildest dreams and in a completely made-up opportunity have been there? So it led me to think, what are the pieces? Is it biological? Is it psychological? And is this something that can be reversed, or is it sort of set in stone? So let me share some of the pieces that I think just reflect the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur and explore how that interacts with women. So the first is persistence and perseverance. This is the grit. This is saying, I'm going to stick with something and I'm not going to let it go. The second is resourcefulness and creativity. The ability to work around issues, the ability to adjust when the barrier comes up. And the third is passion and motivation, really being inspired by an idea and wanting to work and to solve that problem. And I would argue that these three are in equal measures to women and men. The piece that resonates with me, having spoken to hundreds of entrepreneurs, worked in a large part of my career with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, is risk-taking. Why the difference between women and men in risk-taking? And again, is this something that we can change? If this is the key, if this is the component holding women back. So let me describe to you, I'm going to just do two quick studies that describe, I think, what is the essence of the differences approaches to risk. First, Hewlett-Packard. Hewlett-Packard was concerned as a company about why there were not more women at the top leadership roles within their organization. And they conducted a study. And in that study, they found that women were only applying for promotions in the cases that they could check 100% of the job qualifications, whereas men would apply if it was just 60%. So this difference in taking a risk and taking a jump and trying something new flies in the face of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of boxes that can't possibly be checked before you jump into it. And if there's a default, and if you can extrapolate the study, and there's lots of ifs, but if you can, then there may be a reason. This may be getting at the essence of why women are not stepping forward in these roles. The second study I wanted to share is David Dunning and Joyce Erlinger, our psychologists, and they were interested in studying people's perception of their abilities. And they tested a group, men and women, and said, before you take this test, can you assess your ability? And after that test, can you assess it again? And what they found, as you can see in blue here, is women underestimated themselves in both cases, before and after. And in fact, at a level of 20% less, when the actual ability was the same. So what does this mean? We understand there's a difference in risk. But I would argue that it's not that reimagining risk requires changing perceptions. I think if you roll those pieces together, that there is a higher bar, that women set, that there's standards, and that there is a perception of it being higher than actual. So if you can actually decrease the perception, you might be able to get more women to step into considering and taking a risk like entrepreneurship. But clearly, changing perception is not an easy field. And is perception reality is maybe a good question to ask. So let me share with you a little bit. Let me share a little bit more of my story. As it was mentioned, I'm the deputy director at the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute. Our primary goal is to support innovators from across the university, from engineering to the med school, from faculty to students, and the goal is to support and grow scalable new ventures. We've been incredibly successful at it. We started 80 active companies in the last number of years, raised $135 million of venture capital. We have an extraordinary array of resources, 150 mentors, corporate partners, space, funding. And even in our programs, we're seeing a lower representation of women, even with all those resources. So I'm going to share with you some of the pieces that we're putting into place at the ground level. And if we can put these things in place at the ground level and make change at the micro scale, we have the potential to change it at the macro scale. So what are the key pieces? First is awareness. The reason I'm here is actually just to share the story. If people are aware of the facts, the first situation in solving a problem is just knowledge of it. The second is piece that we're trying to do is to get women where they live, to tap into their passions. With the thought, if we can increase the passions that people are working on, we might be able to overcome that perception of risk. So for example, we have a number of programs that we've put into place that are in specific verticals. So looking at medical innovation, looking at social impact, looking at environment, and a few others, trying to get people to encourage and get engaged with some of the resources that we have at the university level. The second is community. We have a small, extremely powerful group of female entrepreneurs and mentors that are willing to spend time with our teams. If we can shine the spotlight on these women as speakers, as role models, we can go and we can change that group of PhD students that couldn't even in their wildest dreams imagine themselves there. And the last is education. And I think this is kind of the key piece to it, is we need to understand that entrepreneurship isn't this risky endeavor. It's actually a fairly well-trodden path, believe it or not, with guideposts and pieces in there. And we've put into place something called lean startup, where people can be educated about trying new business concepts. And let me show and kind of share the example of how it works. So if I have a pen, for example, it's basically applying the scientific method to business. If I have a pen and I love this color and I think there's an opportunity and there's going to be a market for it, I can test it. I can go out, I can go to customers and say, what do you think about this? And depending on the feedback, I'll go forward and continue down my path of developing this lovely new pen, or I'll iterate, I'll change, I'll adjust my concepts. And either way, it's not about success or failure. It's actually just about experimentation. And if you can redefine entrepreneurship to be a grand experiment, there's an opportunity to engage more people to try to take that first risk and that first step, and encouraging action at the end of the day. So we're back to where we started. Risk can be reimagined. And let's go back to the example of the skydiver. Risky. To reimagine risk in this situation, perhaps it's just a matter of trying. Perhaps it's just a matter of saying, I'm going to try this first in a wind tunnel as shown in this picture before I hang from a plane and jump into midair. And maybe just along that same line, if we can encourage women to try, to gain energy, to gain confidence, to step and to leap, we can change their engagement in this area. And as Eleanor Roosevelt has quoted in Mitigating Risk and Imagining Risk, try something every day that scares you. Thank you.